The Tillman story is a documentary about the death of Pat Tillman, a professional football player turned soldier, and it focuses on Pat's family finding out that they were being lied to about the circumstances of Pat's death and them attempting to figure out the truth. Initially, Pat's family was flat out lied to. They were told that Pat was killed by the Taliban in a conflict. And even after this was debunked, more lies were spewed by the army. And Pat's family was under the impression that Pat was killed during a conflict with the Taliban, but the bullet that killed him came from one of his fellow soldiers. Eventually, this notion was also debunked as the P4 memo was released and revealed to the entire nation that in actuality, Pat was killed when there was no opponents present. The Taliban was not even present when he was killed by fratricide. In other words, he was killed by one of his fellow soldiers, and it had nothing to do with the Taliban. So yes, it was true that the army lied about the circumstances surrounding Pat's death, but these lies are not the biggest threat to uncovering the truth about Pat's death. Similar to the situation that involved Ryan and John, there just exists too much context that complicates the truth and makes it simply undecipherable. As the Tillman family takes on the small, simple task of finding out the full truth of how and why Pat was killed, you're probably able to infer by now that I maintain this truth exists somewhere, but it is simply undiscoverable. As I mentioned earlier, we know from the P4 memo that it's true Pat died by friendly fire with no force, no Taliban present. Does this fact encompass the whole truth? Of course not. Similar to the plethora of factors that led to John pushing Ryan in the earlier anecdote, it is impossible to pinpoint all of the factors that led to the soldiers shooting at Pat. A million subconscious and conscious thoughts swarmed through the firing soldier's mind as it happened, and innumerable amounts of their life experiences contributed to this occurrence. Finding out these undiscoverable components is crucial to understanding the truth. There will always exist too many factors to complicate the truth and make it undecipherable. The second truth that Pat's family attempts to discover in the documentary is the truth of who is to blame for the cover-up of Pat's death. They investigate several higher-ups in the military to determine where the blame should fall. In court, these generals lie. General Abizade testified that difficulties in the system and office mix-ups prevented him from receiving the P4 memo immediately. All the other generals told a similar story or stated that they didn't know when they heard the memo. Those in the documentary did not buy such statements, which were meant to deceive just as much as the goat hair on Jacob's arm. But even if all of the generals, and all military personnel involved for that matter, told the truth, there still exists the larger context that makes the truth indecipherable. I mean, how much of an impact did public pressure have on the generals' decisions? Did they make these decisions willingly? Who influenced their decisions? Were the higher-ups even conscious of their biases? How were each of the generals trained? By who? Did the people who trained them or influenced them in their life lead to them acting this way? Are those people to blame? So, what is the truth? Who is to blame for this cover-up? Sure, somewhere out there exists the truth that reveals how much every little aspect contributed to the cover-up, but that truth is simply undecipherable. There are just too many nuances. So yes, the generals could have all given true statements and given their full cooperation, but even then we would be left with a network of true facts, and not the truth. There is a difference. I've said it before, I'll say it again. There will always exist too many complicating factors to ever determine the full truth. In the next video, I'll discuss the most effective way humans can convey the closest thing to the truth.